As I designed this challenge, I intended to leave it as open-ended as possible with only one constraint that I can change the size of the part with one dimension and all the other features would follow suit. And I got quite a few really interesting results. And I'm going to show you some of the more interesting results, and then I named this as a challenge, not as a contest, as a challenge. So I'm going to show you at the end what my favorite solution ended up being. It turns out that within just a couple hours of posting the solution, or maybe it was even just minutes, somebody pointed out that I had an error in my original design, in that I had these two pips in a straight line like this when they're supposed to be diagonal. And so I debated about whether I would even show or demonstrate my original solution. And I decided that all of the solutions that I got, including the original solution that I had, have some value to it as far as demonstrating some modeling techniques that we can just put these techniques in our back pocket, and at some point we'll come along with a design and we'll think, I remember doing something similar to this, and this is how I solved the problem. So let me go back and take a look at that solution, even though it might not have been proper for this design. Now, one thing, I'm in education, so we can't model dice. So we're modeling a genetically modified potato that will pack nicely into a box for shipping. And so we have some eyes on our GMO potato, and let's call this a russet skin red potato. Okay, so I'm going to walk through my solution, so you're going to have to suffer through that. Then I'll show you some of the other unique solutions that I've gotten in SolidWorks and in Fusion 360 and in Inventor, and then I'll show you what my favorite solution is. So let's go for a walk. I'm going to start my first sketch on the XY, or the front plane, and I'm going to do a center point rectangle. I could do a polygon, but I just prefer to use the center point rectangle. And I'm going to then make this side equal to that side, and I'm going to put a line in here from the midpoint here down as a line of symmetry. I'll change that line to construction. I'm going to dimension the side of this, and I'm going to give that a name. I'm going to call that cube, and I'm going to say the cube is equal to, say, 25 millimeters. Alright, and then I'm going to draw some circles on here, and so I'm going to draw a circle up here, and I'll put one down here, and I'll put one down here, and I'm going to then trim off portions of that circle. I'm going to trim off this area, and then I'm going to dimension one of these circles, and I'm going to call that I, and I'm going to make that pip, or that I, equal to this dimension cube divided by 10, or whatever parameter that you prefer. And then I'm going to do equal. This circle arc is equal to that arc, and this arc is equal to this arc. And I'm going to then dimension the distance from here to here, and I'm going to call that pitch, and I'm going to set pitch is equal to the size of the cube divided by 2. And then I'll do symmetry. I want this arc and this arc to be symmetrical about that line. It all turns dark. It's all fully constrained. Now I'm going to change the display of my dimensions, and I'm going to say, just show me the name. So this is my cube, this is the pitch, and this is the eye. If I want to change a dimension, I can just double click on that. And so those would be my global variables in SolidWorks. Then I'm going to extrude the square, and I'm going to do that midplane, and I'm going to do that by the distance cube. Then I'm going to fillet, and I'm going to set that fillet equal to the same radius as the eye, and I'm going to just say all fillets and rounds, and I have that. Did something right, so let's call that potato revision 2. Then I'm going to make the sketch 1 visible again, and I'm going to do a revolve cut of this profile around this line. So I'll put that on cut. Now I'm going to do the same thing down here on the bottom. So this is where I got into trouble, where I actually didn't model this to a standard game dice. So we'll fix all that up in the end. Alright, I'll now turn off the visibility of my sketch, and so I have one eye or one pip on this side, two on this side. I am then going to do a rectangular pattern of this second revolution, and let's do that pattern in the direction of the z-axis. And in SolidWorks you may want to create an X, Y, and Z axis and put that into your template so that you always have that. And then I'm going to put in 3, and for the distance apart I'm going to do pitch divided by 2. And then I want to do that symmetrical about the original. For the next pattern I'm going to select the second revolution, and I'm going to do that as a circular pattern, and I'll do that about the x-axis, and I'm going to do 2 copies, the original plus the copy, 90 degrees, and I'm going to rotate that, put that here. Next I'm going to do a circular pattern of my original revolution, and I'm going to do that about the x-axis. I'm going to say 2 copies, 90 degrees, and I want that over here on this side. Then I'm going to do a circular pattern of the rectangular pattern 1, but this is part of why I like to use this example for my class, in that I don't actually want to do the parent of revolution 1, which or rectangular pattern 1, which is revolution 2. So I'm going to control unselect that parent so that I'm only doing the child, and I'm going to do that then around the x-axis, 2 copies, 90 degrees apart. That'll give me the 5 pip on this side. I'm then going to do another circular pattern of the rectangular pattern. Again, I don't want the revolution 2, so I'll unselect that, control unselect that. And this time I'm going to go around the z-axis, and I'm going to do 2 copies, 90 degrees, and I'll flip that axis. So I'll put the 4 pip on that side. Then I'm going to do another circular pattern of the first revolution, and I'm going to do that about the z-axis. I want 2 copies, 90 degrees apart, and I'll flip that axis, say OK. Then I'm going to do another circular pattern of the rectangular pattern. I'll control unselect revolution 2, and I'm going to do that about the z-axis, and 2 copies, and I want those in 90 degrees, and I'll say OK to that. On this side I have 4, so I need 3 on this side. So I'm going to, they should add up, so I have 1 and 6, 2 and 5 is 7. So I need 3 on this side, so I'm going to do delete face, and I'll delete 2 of the pips healing the part. And so I have 3 and 4, 7, 1 and 6, 2 and 5. And I will put some colors on here so we'll make it look aesthetically pleasing, and you can pick whatever colors that you like. And so then I'll change this this revolution. I'll change the properties of that, and let's make that say black. And I'm going to pick up that color with the eyedropper, and with the paint bucket I'm going to drop it on the rest of these features. Say OK to that. And so there is my design with the mistake on the 2 pips. Now, if I turn on the visibility of the first sketch, the idea was then that I could divide the overall cube height by whatever, and I use a drastic on it when I was testing them out for everybody's submission. I used a drastic change to see if it updated. So if it didn't update, it was automatically not a solution that I was looking for. So now let's look at some of the other solutions. The next 2 examples were submitted in SolidWorks and in Fusion 360 on basically identical solutions. Initially I liked these solutions. I thought that I might select this as my favorite solution, but then after some other consideration I found one that I actually like better. But let's look at and see what we have. I'm going to roll up to the first feature. And so a sketch was created of some path arcs, and then this sketch was revolved and returning spheres. Show that, so 5 spheres, and then a pattern was done of those spheres, and I've only got part of them showing here, but then after that pattern of the spheres, the cube itself, and the cube could be created before the spheres, either order, it doesn't matter, and then a combine subtract to subtract those spheres to leave the pips that we want, and then a fillet on the part size of this, and see that I should be able to change the size of this. Whoops, this might be a little bit too much. Increase this to say 50. Alright, so I'm going to change the size of this to 50, from 5 to 50, and it should all update, which it does. So this one is a good solution. I like it, but in the classroom with all of those bodies, I think that might be a little bit confusing. And then I'm also going to look, and so in the fusion example, it was the same idea, a sketch with the circles, and then just did it in the opposite order. Did the cube first, then filleted the cube, did the revolve, and so the revolve is buried down inside there, the revolved bodies. So here's one of them, and then a pattern of those revolved bodies. I'm not going to show the pattern, but you get the idea. And then combine subtract the spheres, leaving the pips that are desired. And I will try changing the size of this one. So let's see, is the dot size, so I see dot size here, but I don't see dot size being a function of the dice size, so I think this one's going to fail. The one parameter that I did say needed to be a part of the challenge was to change the size. So good idea. Execution could have been one more step, and then that one would have been successful. The next 3 examples basically use the same technique but with slight variations, and I thought this technique was interesting. And it consists of 4 features, but the defining parameter or indicator of the controller of the sketch pip locations was a 3D sketch. Now when I looked at this, I thought, I think I can probably find a way to simplify this, but the location of points are placed on the face of the die, and then a sketch driven pattern to place the revolutions at those points. And so let's test each one of these though. So I'll go into the parameters, and let's change the size of this one, and let's make this one 80, and we'll see if it updates okay. So that one did update okay. That was a sketch driven pattern, and then so this one was also a sketch driven pattern. And let's look at the 3D sketch, and this one in particular, when looking at it, I gave a little bit of thought to this, and I think that this one is pretty simple. It may be a way to simplify it more, but for each point then is a location of a pip. And so let's see if there's a parameter driving everything. And so let's change this length, let's change that to 10, and it updated really fast. So I like that solution. And then another 3D sketch with a curve driven pattern, 4 features, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let's look at this. And so again, the points dimensions in a slightly different way, and again I think we could avoid all of this dimensioning with some sketch geometry, but I like the solution. And so let's see if it updates. And so let's see if there's a username parameter for size. Let's change it, say, to 50, and see if it updates. Alright, so that one updates okay. So those were 3 examples, all slightly different, using a 3D sketch as a sketch driven pattern. The next 2 examples are my favorite thinking outside of the box solutions. And so we see the part, And so if I edit this feature, it's all based on a pattern going around this sketch, and I really wish I had more time to examine this in more detail. I'm going to have to hold on to this one and come back. Maybe the person who did this one will explain it in more detail, but I'm particularly interested in how when I say OK to this, that the pips end up in the right location. So for all of these. Now let's see if we can turn on the visibility of that sketch. I imagine it took a little bit of time to lay this one out and solve it. I don't know if there's a parameter in here that we can change. Let's say change that to 9. I don't see the dot size being a function of the dice size, so I don't think it's going to update correctly, but that would have been easy fix to make. So that was an out-of-the-box thinking in Fusion 360, and I want to take a longer look at that one. And then for a inventor solution, and this one was really clever thinking, the cube, a tool, a revolve tool, and then use the new sweep cut. And let's take a look at that 3D sketch. So I'm going to turn on the visibility of that 3D sketch, and so the cutting tool follows this path, the cutting tool being a sphere, follows this path and goes around and cuts all the pips into the rectangle, into the cube. So that's using the new sweep cut tool. Really clever solution. And but let's see if it will update. Let me turn off the visibility of that sketch, and so I'm going to change this to, let's say, 2. Well, I've let this run for some time and it hasn't updated. I did a trial on this earlier before I demonstrated it, and rather than changing the length here, I did it in the parameters, and it didn't update correctly. So it looked like a really clever solution that might need a little bit more work. And finally, my choice is an ideal potato to demonstrate to class how to model and have them follow along and model themselves, and then have it update the parameters. So first of all, let's check and make sure that this one does update correctly. So I'm going to put that in as 1.5. So we'll make it much smaller, and it updated instantly. And so let's look at how this one was built. So I'm going to go back to the first sketch, and we see that it was a sketch with several circles drawn on that sketch. Now I'm going to change this a little bit. So I'm going to make an update on this to slightly, I think, improve it. One thing I would have done is made these equal. I don't like to repeat dimensions, and this is always going to be a cube. If it wasn't always going to be a cube, then I might. Notice that only one of the circles was dimensions, so equal constraints were put on that. So I would have done equal here and here. And then after that, then the cube was extruded. And here's the key right here. Extrude with the offset from face. And so this can be done in Inventor or SolidWorks as well, where you take your extrusion distance offset from a face. And then I would have done this slightly different to, I think, simplify it, which I'm going to demonstrate here in a few minutes. And then pattern going around this axis, and pattern going around the other axis. And then going through and deleting those pips that aren't needed. And so that's a little bit of work to delete those pips that aren't needed, but that's not terribly bad. One thing that I had a little trouble figuring out how these fillets were selected without getting these edges. I'm making the assumption, unless the person who did this shows me differently, that they went around and control unselected each one of these edges. I'm not sure that it couldn't be done with a rule fillet in Inventor or SolidWorks, but I'm not sure. So I'm going to change my design slightly based on how the fillets were selected. So here is what I decided would be my solution for the class next year. So I'm going to start a new sketch, and I will do my center point rectangle, make two of the sides equal to each other, dimension one of the sides, and so I'm going to make that cube equal whatever, let's say 25 millimeters, and then I'm going to draw a circle at the origin, and I will dimension that circle, and I'm going to make that circle equal to, and actually I want that to be the radius, so let me undo that and put that in again. So I'll dimension, and I want to right click and tell it dimension type radius, and so I'm going to make the radius of this, and I'm going to call that I, and I'm going to make that equal to this divided by 10. Alright, so I'm just still trying to decide whether I want to do that by 10 or by 20. Of course, we can always go back here and change this, and so let me put this as divided by 10. I might still go back and change it again. Alright, that's the beauty of parametric design, is we can put in whatever parameters that we want. And then let me look at this. I'm going to set this to the so this one is I, and this one is Q. I'm going to then do an extrude, and I'm going to extrude the rectangle, or the square midplane by the distance cube, and then I will do a fillet, and I will select the I as my radius, and I'll tell it all features all around. I'll say OK to that, and of course we could do that fillet in different ways. I'm going to make that sketch visible again, so let's turn on the visibility of the sketch, and I'm going to do an extrude, and this time I'm going to select that circle, but I'm going to tell it to go from this sketch plane, and I want to do a cut, and I want to go by the distance I. So I'll list parameters. I'll select I as my distance that I'm going to cut down into that. I'll turn off the visibility of my sketch. I don't need to see that anymore. So I had one sketch with one rectangle or square and one circle. So really simple sketch. Then I will do a rectangular pattern of this feature, and so let me select that feature, and I'm then going to do for the direction, I'm going to select the x-axis, and I wanted to do 3 copies, and I'm going to do that then mid-plane, and I'm going to make this as pitch divided by 4. Say OK to that. And actually I decided I want to make a little change to that, so I'm going to roll back, and I'm going to do a fillet here, and I'm going to do that fillet by radius I, and then I'm going to edit this rectangular pattern so that I don't have to select all those edges for the fillets. I'll edit that feature, and I'll also select the fillet, and then I'm going to do a rectangular pattern of that, and so I'll select this rectangular pattern, and this time I'm going to go on direction Y, and I'll tell it to go both sides, and then 3 copies, and I want that to be equal to pitch. I guess I named it pitch, so I just need to put in the pitch, and then I'll do a circular pattern, and I will select these features, and then I will do a circular pattern around the x-axis. I want 4 copies in 360 degrees, so I have all of those, and then I'll do my circular pattern going the other way, and so I'll do a circular pattern of this geometry about the y-axis, 4 copies, and then it's simply a matter of going through and deleting the extra pips. Now that's a little bit of work, but you know, it's pretty easy to show beginning students how to do this. And so I want the 1 spot on that, I want the 2 spot on this side, I want the 3 spot on this side, and actually I think the 2 and the 3 come up here. So let me control again, this makes it easy to edit, and so you know, you can go real easily through and select the features that you want to get rid of, and then on this side I want the 5, and on this side I want the 4, and back around to 2, and then on this side I want the 6, so I'll leave that alone. And so let's see what I've got. So I've got the 1 opposite 6, the 2 opposite 5, the 4 opposite 3. I can change my color to some, whatever color that I want it to be. Let's maybe on this one I'll do it as yellow. I can change one of these faces. We'll change the appearance of one of these faces to black, and then with the eyedropper I'll pick up that color and I will drop that on all of my other features. I see actually I made a mistake here, so I have 9, so real easy to fix that. I just edit that feature and select this one, and this one. I have it on heal, so there is our completed part. Now we need to make sure that we can update it, so I'll go to the parameters, and I need to find my cube, and so it's 25. Let's put it at 2.5 and make sure that it will update correctly. So that was 2.5. I could go the other way and change it to 250 and say okay to that, and it should update to the new size. Alright, so the process, we saw it in Fusion 360. We saw it in Inventor. It would be all but identical in SolidWorks. I might, in my template file, create X, Y, and Z axis in order to do that in SolidWorks.